Okay, hello chess players. This video is going to be called The Truth About the Stafford Gambit. We're going to be taking a look at the Stafford, which begins after e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight takes e5, knight c6. This begins the Stafford Gambit, knight takes c6, dc6. And more specifically, I want to sort of analyze sort of what the truth of this opening is on multiple levels. Not just the truth behind it in terms of an engine assessment, but also the truth on a practical level. What do people typically play in these positions? Where do people fall for their traps on each level of play? Like, I'm going to be taking a look at the Lichess database. I'm going to be taking a look at my own personal results. And I'm, of course, going to be taking a look at the Masters database as well, just to see where the top players in the world are having difficulties with this opening, if they're having any actual difficulties at all. And we're just going to be taking a look at the truth of the opening on those levels. We're not going to be taking a look at every line. That's going to be restricted to like my how-to videos. If you want a complete opening survey, look at my how-to videos. If you want a practical guide to what most people are playing and what most people are missing, then this is probably the video for you. Anyways, if you like content like this and want to see more of it, hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So right here, as you can see, I'm scoring right around 62% here. That's me at like a 2400 level. If we take a look at the Lichess database, you notice Black's actually doing okay for the overall rating. We're looking at like an average rating of about 1500, 1562, and Black's actually outperforming White's. So I'm starting to see like why this opening is so popular, at least among the average player. They are getting good results. I think as you get higher and higher and people are better and better at memorizing theory, the results get better and better. Like even with me, if you just give me a little bit more time to not blunder. These are my bullet chess results. I've got 53 games in bullet chess where I played d3 and I scored 62%, which is good. But if we raise it to, say, blitz chess instead, where I have a little bit more time, I'm scoring 67%. So I've got 24 games in blitz chess. I'm scoring 67%. I'm scoring quite a bit better in blitz, by about 5%, which is statistically actually pretty significant. I'm only losing 21% of the time. We go back to bullet, I'm actually losing 36% of the time. So my results in blitz are actually significantly better than my results in bullet. Now, when I was looking at my personal results, I was trying to figure out like where am I making my mistakes. And one of the things I noticed was like if I have d3 and then bishop c5 and then bishop e2, I'm actually not having a whole lot of problems against the most popular move here where I'm scoring 68%. I'm not having huge difficulties against this move. My performance rating is right at 2500. I'm doing very well. I'm scoring 68%. I'm getting 68% of the time. This is the move that's getting played 92% of the time in my blitz games. So h5, it's the move that I have the most experience against, and I also know the theory really well. And I was looking through the games that I lost, and even in the games that I lost, like this one right here, this game that I lost, I definitely did not lose because of the opening. We can just run through kind of what happened in that game. It went like knight c3, knight g4, d4, and I think this game that I lost was actually bishop d6. This was my game against Hawaiian Dragon. And if we run the engine on it, you can see I'm still doing quite well. I played e5. The engine still loves me. I play h3, knight h6. I actually take, and then I play knight d2, and there's actually no problem with all of this. And I make it well out of the opening before I start having any difficulties. We have bishop d7, I castle queenside, everything is still going great. We have bishop c6, and now just queen f4 is just massive advantage white. And I actually make the mistake of exchanging queens. And that gets black back to nearly equality. And it didn't take a whole lot for me to make one or two mistakes later and actually end up losing the game. And this was something that I noticed in the bullet games as well, is where I was actually having the most trouble, like on my level, which is like, the 24, 2500 level, somewhere in there. Um, where I was having the most trouble at my level was actually positions where black ended up being down a pawn and just managed to get really close to equal and then just managed to kind of outplay me later. One thing that you've got going for you in the Stafford is that it does take a little bit of work to work through the complications if you're playing white, whereas maybe it takes less work to play the moves if you're black. So you might have a time advantage and you might be able to swindle later. So if you can get somewhere close to equality, then maybe you have a good shot. And I know that a lot of you are thinking, oh my gosh, if I exchange queens in the Stafford Gambit, that's absolutely terrible. That's probably true, like at the 1500 level or the 1600 level. But interestingly enough, I'm noticing that I'm having the most trouble with positions like this, where black is basically a pawn down, but probably equal. And I noticed it kind of across the board. I noticed it in my bullet games as well. So like if we take a look at my bullet games. There's this one line specifically that I am having trouble against in my bullet games anyway, and it's knight c6, and it kind of goes down this same road: knight c6, dc6, d3, bishop c5, bishop e2. I'm actually having a lot of trouble against knight g4, and it's a goofy move, and it doesn't seem like this should be a huge issue. Yet I am actually having difficulties against it. You can see I'm only winning 33% of the time. My performance against this move is abysmal. It's absolutely terrible. So it's bishop g4, queen h4, and of course here's where I'm having the difficulty. I'm not finding queen f3. I haven't found queen f3 in any of my games, and it's maybe a somewhat difficult move to find because you're thinking, okay, queen f3. I mean, I'm just losing tempo to something like bishop g4, but then of course queen g3. They really don't have anything better than just to simplify this position, and you're up a really solid pawn, and you've got a really good game. And this is definitely the way to go. This isn't showing up in my database at all as anything that I've ever actually found or anything that I've ever actually played. But it's interesting that I'm sort of avoiding the queen exchange here when it is the most natural thing, probably because instinctively I'm thinking, hey, I'm losing. If I play queen f3, I'm losing this tempo to bishop g4. So I'm playing other moves here that tend to be inferior to that queen f3. D4, you can see the assessment immediately goes to equality, and I'm already having trouble. And I'm losing a lot of games here. It's taking me more time to figure this out, especially in a bullet game. I'm losing a ton of these games on time, like d4 and then queen d3. Like I'm still technically doing okay, but I'm just getting into a ton of trouble here in terms of results. Another example would be castles, which apparently castles I've done the best in, which makes a certain amount of sense because once I play castles, number one, my assessment hasn't dropped that much, and number two, it's actually fairly easy to figure out what to do next for white. Like bishop g4, you don't have anything better than queen e1, and then, for example, like castle's queenside or even like bishop d6, this game that I lost, I immediately found the best move. I played f4, and then we had this exchange of queens. And again, we have this weird position where you have an exchange of queens. It's +1 for white, so the opening is clearly not a problem. But I've eaten up a lot of clock time to get here, so the odds of me blundering down the road are maybe going to be a little bit higher. So that's one of the difficulties in this situation is I've eaten up so much clock time. And actually, I think this particular game, I I don't think I ever actually made a real mistake like anywhere in the game. I think I basically just ran the clock down so low that eventually like I just didn't have enough time to finish the game. I'm sitting here struggling to just like find all the moves to move quick enough and just not get in trouble. But time is of course a factor, especially in these games, especially in bullet chess, where the gambits are going to get a little bit stronger as the time controls get tighter and tighter and tighter. And of course, we don't just see that in my games. We're also going to see that in the Lichess database as well. So, like if we look at the Lichess database, and we're looking at all these rating ranges. So we're looking at the Lichess database. Let's go back to just the Stafford Gambit in general and we're looking at this Lichess database and we want to see how people are doing, you can see people are doing very well with the black pieces in the Lichess database. And if we go to the Masters database and take a look, you're going to see something very different. You're going to see that black basically gets wiped out. And this is something that's going to as you get better and better, so it's like a Masters database. So again, these are going to be tournament time control games as well. So these are going to be games where people had all the time in the world to figure out all the lines and all the gambits. These aren't going to be blitz games necessarily. They might be, but for the most part, they're not going to be blitz. They're going to be maybe standard games or whatever. You're going to see that it's been played very, very rarely. We've got a total of 4 games in here, and of course, white is doing incredibly well. The overall assessment is going to matter so much more the better that you get, and the more theory that you know, you're going to be able to figure these things out, especially the more time that you have. So the master's database, for the most part, and all of this stuff is going to look sort of like a wipeout. Like occasionally black is going to get a draw or whatever, but for the most part, it's going to be a wipeout. The Lichess database, surprisingly, is just favoring black. I guess people do just have a lot of trouble at that 1500 range, or that 17, 15 to 1700 range. They do have a lot of trouble finding the moves that don't fall for the traps. And of course, my personal experience is, quite a bit better than that. I'm doing quite a bit better than that 50%. Anyway, so going back to this Lichess database, one of the things that I suspect, and we'll just see what happens, because I might be surprised, is that if I go from blitz chess, which is what I'm looking at right now, where white has more time to think, if I go to bullet chess, somehow I think we're going to see the performance for black improve because I see that in my own games. So let's see if that matches with Lichess database, and it does. I see this um, slightly improving performance for black, especially with the main move with h5. We're looking at 53% when we're looking at just the bullet games. And if I change that to blitz, we're looking at only 50%. So black is actually performing slightly better in the bullet uh, with the Stafford, even at the regular player level. So the faster the time controls get, the better gambits typically are. Especially a gambit like the Stafford, where you're basically just playing for a couple of really straightforward traps, and the moves that you personally play are really easy to remember. Now, if we take a look at this main line, if we take a look at H5, and then you see the statistics for even the regular people go up just if they find C3. So if you're memorizing the theory or you're trying to memorize the theory, keep in mind this is probably the most critical inclusion. And I go over this in my How to Refute the Stafford video, but even if you just forget everything else, if you remember to play C3 and prepare D4 in this critical position, you're increasing your odds of winning your games, whether they be bullet or blitz, even at the regular player level, you're increasing your odds pretty significantly. And of course, at this point, across all these metrics, now white is favored to win. So now the traps are sort of insufficient. If you miss this, you are giving up a lot in terms of traps. You can see that like a move, especially like early castling, this is really, really nasty. This is the one thing that I recommend to people when they're playing against the Stafford is the main thing you have to remember to do is whatever you do, just don't castle. If you castle early against a Stafford, I mean, especially after they play a move like H5, this should be a signal. They're planning something if you castle. Please do not castle. Castling is just, from a practical point of view, it's very, very terrible. But even from an engine point of view, just look at the evaluation drop to essentially equal. You went from a position where you had a clear advantage, 1 to 2 pawns. Now we have a position that's at 0.5, still slightly favoring white, according to the engine anyway. But, I mean, you already made one error that dropped 2 pawns. I mean, it's not going to be hard to make another. And it's dicey. You can just see these results are just very, very good for the Lichess database. You won't see it in my player database at all, by the way. So you're not going to see it in the player database, and you're not going to see this in the Masters database. Nobody is going to castle here that knows what they're doing. Just about everybody is going to play C3. You see this on the Masters database as well. We only have 2 games, but it was C3 and it was Bishop E3 got played. These are the 2 moves that got played. Bishop e3 probably has this. Actually, Bishop e3 is a little questionable, but it's interesting because it does exchange the bishops. I can see the argument for it. It is an interesting move, but of course, it wasn't successful in the game either. It got a draw, although the rating difference was close to 100 points. So it was actually statistically, it was a better result for white, I guess. Um, so yeah, castling, not a move that we want to see here. The move that we want to see is going to be c3. So that's probably the main thing that you have to remember when you're playing against the Stafford is, throw in this c3 move. Another piece of advice I might give Stafford Gambit players is definitely this knight g4, especially in bullet, at least against me. Look, if you're playing against me, I think knight g4 is the move to play because it looks like, at least in my personal games, and probably other masters might have this issue as well. Nobody's finding queen f3. I mean, we're even looking at the masters database here, and even though I'm higher rated than the person that was playing the white pieces here, but still, he didn't find queen f3 either. He found g3, which is of course at least inferior to you know this other move. And then after this queen exchange, black still managed to draw, even though black is doing worse. And this is kind of my experience as well. Is that even though the queens are off the board, and even though I'm up a pawn, black has the bishop pair, and it's not an insignificant problem to try to solve with the white pieces, even though white objectively is quite a bit better here. This is obviously plus 1.4 pawns for white, and white is doing quite a bit better here. So that kind of leaves me to my overall conclusion about the Stafford, which is your best bet is going to be to play c3. And then, of course, after knight g4 and then d4, this is essentially what we're looking at is like this recitation of the Stafford. And you can actually look at that in my player database as well. And even against the best lines, I am definitely doing better than what I should be doing, statistically. So like even against like queen h4, g3, and then queen f6, and it's important to note that once I start employing bishop f3, it looks like I only have 4 games here, and I'm 50-50. And it looks like I'm scoring even with my opponents. So, but the engine is saying plus 2.5. So the engine is saying plus 2.5 here. So the overall engine assessment is that white is quite a bit better. So we have bishop f3, we have bishop e7. Let's take a look at one of my losses. Let's go to bishop b6. I've had more trouble against that somehow. H3, and then what do we got? We got knight h6, and just to see if I'm losing for the opening or if I'm losing for some other reason. So e5, queen e6, bishop g2, queen g6, what do we got? Knight d2. I'm still doing great. Bishop f5, a4, a5, castles, queen e6. Still not seeing the problem. I'm 17 moves in. Everything looks great. Oh, king h2, knight g4 check, h6 g4 because I can. H6 g4, king back to h2. Where do things go wrong? And then I find knight f3, and then I find knight h4, g5. I find bishop g5. What is the issue? I'm killing it. 22 moves in. I'm +3. I haven't made a mistake yet. Maybe I just lose on time. Rook e1 is great. Yeah, this is a spectacular position for white. It's definitely not the opening. We're way past the opening, and everything's going good. It doesn't even go past this, and I'm still +2. So I don't know, probably got into time pressure and probably lost. I mean, it just proves that you can lose a chess game at any phase. But I mean, everybody can still make mistakes. I think it's easier for people to make mistakes from an equal position than a position where you're -2. That's just my personal opinion. Uh, this position is clearly really good for white. White has the better bishop. This bishop is completely trapped. Um, I don't know. Maybe I lagged out this game. It's hard to say. We actually see this position. It's my game in the Lee Chess database. My game though. Okay, but if I go back, let's see here. Do we see anybody else copying the gist of this up to here? Sure, we do. And on the Lee Chess database, yeah, if you get here, white's doing pretty good. It looks like. Although against Queen G6, surprisingly white's not doing great, even though, again, the engine says white's doing quite well. 64% just bishop takes h6, though. So just simplifying in that position is getting kind of the best results. That makes sense because it solves a lot of your problems. You just take, and play knight d2, and then it's easy to solve the rest of your issues. You know how to develop everything. Maybe that's just the best piece of advice there. Just rip that knight and then just develop, and then it's much easier to play, even though maybe your total overall assessment has dropped a little bit. Um, Now going back to maybe like the so-called refuge, like the main line. Yeah, so one thing that I would recommend against, and I'm not sure what the database says about it. We're going to take a look. It's not, I don't think it's going to be in my personal player database. It's D4 and then say Queen H4, and then we're going to have G3, Queen F6. The one thing that I do recommend against is this move Pawn F3, which I don't think I've ever actually played it. I'm very paranoid about allowing like F3 and then H4 and going into these wild lines. And I suspect, yeah, if we look at the lead chess database, black is doing quite well here. Black is getting a lot of counterplay in these lines, and of course, this is the line referred to as like the magical Schrantz line, where you know black is actually getting a ton of play, even though the computer assesses this very high for white. So on a practical level, it's very high. It looks like in the Masters database, we've got this getting played one time, big rating difference. You know, at over 300 point rating difference. Eh, I mean, yeah, white won. I don't know. We can almost dismiss the result though, because the rating difference is so high. But like we have rook g1, hg3, and of course, I think Schranz does better coverage of this because it's a very complicated line, and you can't 100% go by the engine here. But I would just recommend against going down this road, entirely. Bishop f3 is just a much better move, a much more solid refutation. The computer actually likes it a little bit better. So I would definitely go down this route and go down this refutation. The engine analysis is really good. Actually, I think if I look at myself, I don't have a large sample of games in this line in the Blitz database, but if I look at my bullet results, we'll actually maybe see something closer to the truth here. Yeah, I score much better in bullet, although still 50% in some lines, like 50% against bishop e6, against bishop b6, I actually do better, 67%. But yeah, I'm not dropping below 50, so I'm doing quite well. And I think my recent games in this are pretty good. More wins than losses anyway, in the most recent games. So still a little bit of theory to learn. But anyways, that's the truth about the Stafford Gambit. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope you learned something new about chess. And I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.